Okay, I'm Niara Isley. I'm doing a talk on the Consciousness Initiative, which is about using consciousness for positive change on the planet. And let's kind of get moving here. So these are pictures of me. The one on the left, of course, is me, my military picture from boot camp. And the one on the right is me as a little girl in first grade. The military me is the one that most people are familiar with because I've have my book out there and I've told my story several times over in interviews and appearances and things like that. And the things that happened to me in the military, to make a long story short, because I wrote about them in my book. So if you want to know the in-depth story, read my book. And one of the things that, I'll just kind of recap it a little bit. So back in 1993, 1994, I was talking with a friend of mine, and we were talking about my military time, and I discovered that I had 3 months of missing time from the military that I couldn't remember. And with that coming over me, I had this sweep of nausea just kind of went over me and like, oh, I can't remember 3 months of my life. And the people that really know me know that I have a really good memory. So not being able to remember 3 to 4 months of my life during the military was very startling and very disturbing. Probably within a year after discovering that missing time, I was at the Whole Life Expo in Las Vegas, and I ran into Bud Hopkins. And at the end of his presentation, I raised my hand and I said, well, I have this weird experience from childhood, and I have this other strange experience that happened here. And then when I was in the Air Force in 1980, there's 3 months of my life from January to April or May that I can't remember anything. And he said, talk to me afterwards. So I did, and he did a hypnosis session on me that night, and a chunk of my missing time came tumbling out. And it was like being Alice thrown down the rabbit hole in a very dark and disturbing way. I was scared, suddenly I was scared. I'm looking behind myself all the time, wondering, what the heck happened? What is this all about? And being me, which I'll tell you about the child me in a few minutes, I had to know. I had to know what happened. What the heck is going on here? And if this kind of stuff does happen, in what political and social context can it happen in a country that I grew up to think was a really great country? Sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. So in the aftermath of that, I'm like trying to figure out what's going on. So I did tons of research. I met a wonderful lady who's here at this conference, and I'm so happy to reconnect with her after a period of time where I was kind of out of commission for a while, Misha Johnston. And she was a tremendous help to me in trying to put the pieces together of what happened. So basically what I remembered under hypnosis with Bud was being taken out of my motel room in Tonopah, Nevada, and taken out to the radar range where I did radar work. It was surface air missile and anti-aircraft artillery radar. And what we did, what our main daytime job was teaching pilots to fly against radar in a simulated wartime situation so that it would increase their survivability flying against radars in a real wartime situation. And so we were taken out in the middle of the night at gunpoint. We were given fatigues to wear with no rank insignia, no name tags, or identifying marks of any kind. And we were told to run the radar on these special aircraft. So we did it. The aircraft could not be tracked. Then afterwards, I went out on the deck of the radar van with 2 other guys that had been pulled out there with me. And we were told in no uncertain terms by people with guns, do not talk to each other, do not have any conversation with each other whatsoever. You're out here to do this, and that's it. So we stood there silently watching these discs that were in the sky that we had been trying to track. We didn't know what the aircraft were until we were out on the deck of the radar van. So We stood out there, and I saw one of the craft there, and it was, I focused on the closest one because I wanted to see as much detail on at least one of them that I could. And it was glowing orange on the bottom. It had lights on the bottom that were like lighting up in sequence, and it made the effect that looking like it was spinning on the bottom. So I'm watching this, and I'm really scared because I'm thinking, I only have a secret security clearance. And this has got to be classified way above top secret. So I was really scared, and for good reason. They put us on a bus and took us to what I believe was either Area 51 or another underground facility that William Pollack spoke of in his interview with Stephen Greer. And he didn't even allow that interview to be released until after his death. So that's when I found out that there was also an underground facility at Tonopah. Anyway, I was taken someplace out in the middle of the Nevada desert in the middle of the night. We were taken to something that looked like an old military medical dispensary, and sat down in this waiting room. The lights were off in the waiting room. Everything was very carefully done, from the fatigues with no rank insignia or identifying marks, to being isolated from the people I was out there with by not being allowed to talk to them. And then the medical dispensary, even the waiting room that we were seated in, had the lights off. The only light coming into that room was from double door, that was a hallway where the lights were on in the hallway, and the lights were shining through the windows of those double doors. One by one, they called us by name, and we had to go in this little side room. When it was my turn, I went in the little side room. There was a soldier in there with a sidearm standing at parade rest, and I had to lay down on a stainless steel examining table and just wait. And I waited a little while, getting more and more scared by the minute, wondering what was going to happen to me. And then finally a guy in a white lab coat came in saying, "Stay calm, stay calm, stay calm," this really deadpan voice. And when he got past the security guard, he walked up to the right side of my head, and with one smooth move, like he'd done it a million times, he injected me in the side of the neck with a hypodermic needle, and there was some chemical that just rushed straight to the brain. My body was immediately put into trauma, and I kind of lost orientation of where I was, because my body was dealing with what happened. And then suddenly there were two security guards on either side of me, lifting me off the table and taking me out this other doorway down a long flight of stairs. And it didn't seem like switchback stairs, you know how the kind that go like that. This seemed to go straight down. And at the bottom, I was shoved in this little room, and the door was shut behind me, and I kind of noticed that there was like a mirror on one wall, and it had a strange look to it, and I thought, oh, that's like a two-way, like mirror on my side and then glass on the other. So they watched me go through the effects of that injection. A few years ago, several years ago, I guess now, I saw the movie Lucy, and it's a very triggering movie because the stuff in that movie was kind of a fluorescent blue. The stuff they injected me with was fluorescent green. And so in that little observation booth room, I went through the effects of the injection, and it felt like my body was coming apart at the molecular level. And it was terrifying. The way I've described it is feeling like my body was turning into soda pop fizz or beer foam, something that might just run down a drain on the floor. And of course, it didn't happen, but that was the intense sensation that was just all over my body. So I just laid on the floor and screamed until the effects of it began to wear off. And then from there, they took me out of the room at that point. And even in Lucy, when they had her open the briefcase where the blue stuff was in it, they all hid behind shields. So it might be that there was something about what they injected me with might have spilled over onto the people around me. So that's why they had me in the room and stayed outside and watched through the window. The next thing that happened was I was dragged out of there, and while I was still shaking from the from the effects of that injection, I was sexually assaulted by the 2 security guards while 8 people watched. One of the people was a gray extraterrestrial. So basically, I disassociated. I just kind of went someplace else while this was happening to me. And just give me a minute. And I know, thank you. I love all of you too. Thank you. I haven't told this story to an audience in a very long time. So anyway, I kept a little shred of my attention on the guns in the room because I thought, if somebody drops their guard for 1 second and I get near enough to one of those guns, everybody in this room's going down. Because when I went through boot camp, I was a crack shot. Anyway, that didn't happen, and thank God it didn't, because I didn't need that karma. So anyway, that was done. Then I was injected with some other kind of drug to put me to sleep, and because of the sheer trauma of it, that kind of trauma, your mind says, okay, this is not something you can handle remembering. So it kind of breaks that piece off and sticks it in the deep subconscious where you don't get it. So I woke up in my motel room the next day, got up and did my job just like usual, probably had some kind of hangover from the experience, but I just attributed it to being tired. And they were very careful not to leave marks. So that was the first chunk of memory that I got back in the hypnosis session with Bud Hopkins. And there's much more that happened during that 3-month time period that I'm not going to go into right now, because I wrote it in my book so I don't have to say it anymore. But I wanted people who aren't familiar with me in this audience to have some idea of what happened. So I went through these experiences, and I spent probably 14, 15 years doing all kinds of research again to find out, how does this happen in the United States of America, and in what political and social context? And of course, then I found out about the shadow government and the group that they call the cabal, and really learned a lot. And once I felt that, I kept researching all the time, but then I thought, well, what do I do with this? I got to try to live a normal life. So that's what I tried to do. I just tried to go out and live a normal life. Didn't work too well. There's still stuff. And before I got the memory back, I was living a life after getting out of the military in 1983. I had PTSD, and I'd go back to my conscious memories, and it would be like, why do I have all this stuff going on? I didn't really even name it PTSD. I didn't know it was PTSD, because why would I have PTSD? What would happen to me that caused PTSD? Because I didn't have the memory. But I did have PTSD, and it did affect my relationships. It affected my relationships with my children. I really, paid a price. And the anxiety level and the stuff that would come up was just intense. I call PTSD today like living in a cement mixer. And you just kind of tiptoe around in your life and hope nothing turns that cement mixer on that's just going to buffet you around with these intense survival emotions of PTSD. So finally, when I got the memories back, then some of my past with the anxiety and the stuff that I would experience started to make some sense. So fast forward to where I was, and I'm trying to find a way to live a normal life, even though I have a chunk of these memories back. And I wasn't in any shape after getting those memories back to do any more hypnosis, because I was afraid there were worse things in there, and indeed there were. Again, I direct you to the book. I didn't write this book to make $1 billion. I wrote it to put truth out there to help others like myself. Thank you. Thank you. And, I just tried to get on with a normal life. I worked with a business coach for a while, first trying to get my life coaching business going because I got certification from Gay and Kathleen Hendricks in body-centered transformation therapy. And that didn't work. Worked on that, trying to get that going for a couple of years. And then I thought, well, this isn't working. So I talked to my coach and I said, I think I'm going to try to focus on an art career because I do art as well. And I tried that for another year and nothing really took off. And finally, my coach said, I don't understand. You're doing all the things I'm telling you to do and nothing's happening, but it's working for my other clients. And I said, I don't know what's going on either. So I finally stopped working with her and I just went quiet. I said, okay, universe, what is my thing to do in this world? And before I even got that sentence finished in my head, the answer came, you need to tell your story. Oh, you mean that one I've been avoiding for 14 years? Yes, that one. So I thought, okay. So in December of 2008, I put an article out. The first thing I did was I wrote an article in support of an article written by Edgar Mitchell in the Institute of Noetic Sciences magazine. And I wrote, and that was my first little tiptoe out into the public. And then I thought, well, I need to come out with this more. So I wrote a couple articles that went on the web, and then suddenly everybody's emailing me and wanting to do this, and I started getting interviews. And but everybody in the interviews was all hung up on, woman raped in Black Ops Project. And I've been spending 14 years with this and continuing to do my spiritual seeking and my spiritual practice and just being me, who I was as a little girl, who grew up to be a spiritual person. So after a while, people were getting so hung up in this horror story. And I thought, there's so much more to this. I've come a long way since that horror story. And I thought, I got to write the book so that people know that there's more to this than just that. And so I wrote the book. And people still in the UFO field, they seem to want to keep me in this box. Woman raped in Black Ops Project. I'm kind of trotted out like this little victim. Yes, tell your story. Okay, now go sit down. And everything else like that. See the kind of stuff that happens in Black Ops projects and stuff like that. It's like, okay, there's got to be more meaning to this than that. So now I'm going to go back to the little girl picture, okay? This little girl that I was, and still am, she was born a spiritual seeker. She's been a spiritual seeker. I've been a spiritual seeker from the cradle up, before I even knew the word spiritual, because I was raised in the Lutheran religion. And I saw a lot of hypocrisy in the Lutheran religion that really bothered me as a little girl, because my parents ended up getting divorced because of my dad's alcoholism. And then the church community ostracized my mother, and my mother was excommunicated from the Lutheran church for divorcing my abusive husband, or her abusive husband, sorry. And I didn't think that was right because she was trying to protect herself. So I went through, just in case there was something to Lutheran beliefs, I went all the way through to catechism and took my first communion, and no great secret was revealed. So after that, I just kind of made a break with the church and went my own way. Got into things like, astrology and meditation. And I read Paramahansa's book, Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi, which was life-changing, and many other things. I studied metaphysics, just really went into all that stuff. So that's basically who I am, and still am today. Of course, I've gathered a lot more knowledge, and now I want to do good things with that knowledge. So, thank you. So I remember when I was a little girl, I'd be reading all these books about science and history, and I read a lot of biographies of famous people like explorers and statesmen, because I really wanted, I didn't just do what school put in front of me. I wanted to go the extra 10 miles and really learn about this, because I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know everything about the world I lived in, the universe, about myself and what my place might be in the universe. And this was really important to me. It was really a passion for me. It was really a passion for me. And so, among other things that happened in school, as an early indigo child, which I definitely claim to be, we had standardized testing, where you fill in the little bubbles with the pencil, number 2 pencil. And so the science stuff was a breeze because I was studying science all the time. So got a good grade there, and reading, got good grades there, and mathematics, not so good, because that's when the domestic violence in the home was the worst, was when I was learning mathematics and arithmetic. Otherwise, I would be a really formidable quantum physics scientist about now. But I lost the mathematical ability because of that. So I'm filling out the things, and whenever I came to a part of the test, usually mathematics, it was like, well, I can't do this, and they've got a clock on me, and I can't get it done. So I thought, well, I'm just going to sit here, and what can I do with this? So I filled in the bubbles in the prettiest pattern that I could imagine on the page. Oh, that's nice. I'm going to go this way, and that way, and this sort of thing. And the other thing about me that my teachers really didn't like was my wool gathering. You know, she's a million miles away out the window. Never her mind on what's going on. You know, well, it's just me, you know. I can't be different, it's just me. So I got shamed a lot and told I wasn't, you know, doing what I was supposed to be doing. So anyway, that's a little bit about who I was as a child. And I'm really glad that I was that way, because I think it protected me from getting really deep indoctrination, which I'll be talking about here pretty soon. So I'm very grateful that the little girl that I was stuck to her guns and just stayed her. Stayed who she knew she needed to be. So thank you. And thank you. Thanks. Let's see. So I wrote the book because Spirit wanted me to write the book, wanted me to tell my story, wanted me to get it out there. The other thought that I had about writing the book was that, you know, one day after all these years, this idea just shot into my brain that by staying silent and not speaking out, I was allowing the kind of abuse that I went through to go on for other people. And once I had that thought, there was no going back, because I'm a person with a heart who loves, you know, and I don't want to see people go through what I went through. The things that I went through have made me into a person that believes to be unkind to someone is a cardinal sin. Unkindness is a cardinal sin. And on Facebook, I see all these attacks and everything, and when I get back home, I'm probably going to put a post up on Facebook that's going to say, behind every profile picture, as long as it's not a fake profile, there is a human being with a heart and a soul and feelings. And you can't just be screaming at everybody without causing pain. So, So I designed this banner to put up on Facebook after the book was published or during the publishing process. And I thought I wanted to come up with something that would let people know, you know, might be an interesting read. So sometimes breaking into a million pieces can take you places you never dreamed possible. And that's very, very true. So with that, I have something I want to read. And it's from We Are All Shamans in Training, which was published by Paul Levy in 2010 on his website. Trauma is a normal, healthy response to an insane and intolerable situation. There is an intimate correlation between being traumatized, abused, and wounded and having a shamanic initiation, spiritual awakening. Trauma is an experience that is overwhelming to the ego, in that it can't be assimilated by the ego in the typical way. The trauma initiates and catalyzes the deeper process of the archetype of the shaman to begin to formulate and crystallize itself in the unconscious of the future shaman. This precipitates a deeper part of the psyche to become mobilized as the shaman journeys deep inside themselves, flying on wings of their creative imagination to address and become acquainted with what has gotten activated within them. The shaman's descent into darkness can be agonizing, a veritable crucifixion. Part of the archetypal shamanic experience is to become dismembered, which is a cooking and smelting of psychic contents that have become rigidified, ossified, and have outlived their usefulness. To quote Carl Jung, the shaman's experience of sickness, torture, death, and regeneration implies, at a higher level, the idea of being made whole through sacrifice. The goal of the shaman's death and dismemberment experience is to remember themselves, which, like true soul retrieval, brings all of their disassociated parts back together into a more integrated synthesis. And this has been my goal all these years, to come back to that. And I'm glad I didn't remember the experiences at the time they happened, because if I had, let's just say I have a very powerful belief, knowledge, that suicide is not a way out, but a way to make your soul's journey through the universe much, much worse, and to get stuck in places you don't want to get stuck in. And so I'm very powerfully knowing that suicide is not a way out. So, but it would have been very hard to avoid suicide if I had had to remember those experiences at the time that they happened, because they were so intense and so shattering. So the most vital thing I have to share today is not about my trauma. It's about how unified consciousness can take back our planet. Because, thank you. Because one of the other things I've discovered through the years is that my soul ancestry, beyond going back to the great, ocean of consciousness that we all come from, is Lyran. I'm a Lyran who's been like one of Dolores Cannon's volunteer souls. I came back here and I really realized that the experiences I had in the military were part of a soul contract to come back here and to go through that and then to recover from it and do what I'm doing today. So, whoops, we got a thing there here. So anyway, so with these experiences and recovering from them has come out a whole bunch of other information. So I had the spirituality piece from earlier, and then with the shadow government stuff and things that I had to process there, I really understood and put together that consciousness was the way to really go with this. How's it going? Got anything back here? Okay, great. Okay. So that's a little bit, I have to kind of catch my place here. But so anyway, being Lyran, those memories started to actually emerge when I was 17 or 18 years old. My first memory that came back from the past was dying in the tidal wave that took out Atlantis. And I was like a young priestess initiate in temple in Atlantis. And our priesthood was corrupt. They were working with the government people. And I was like a person that had clairvoyance. I was able to see what was going to be happening in the future. And I began having these terrible nightmares of a cataclysm hitting Atlantis. And so I went to the elders and I said, this is what I'm dreaming, and this is coming. I know it's coming. I feel it in my gut. It's really coming. And at that point they forbade me to leave the temple or temple grounds anymore, because they didn't want me to say anything to anyone else that would cause a panic in the population. There was another young male initiate in the temple that I was really close with, would have been a romantic partner had we been allowed to engage in that. And so I told him, and we became, we kind of confided in each other. And then one morning I had the knowledge that this was coming, it was imminent, that the tidal wave that was coming was imminent. And so I went and talked to him, and I said, it's really coming. It's going to be very soon, like within 24 hours. So we both made our plan, and we snuck out of the temple at that point, and we went down to the ocean, and I remember it so clearly. There was this high cliff up here and the ocean spreading out over here. And there were tall cypress trees growing at the top of the cliff. And he came from one direction and I came from another. And the tide had gone out, in that big tide, the way the tide goes out before a tsunami. And we met and we held hands and we just looked at each other in the eyes. And then we saw the wave coming and we just held each other and let it take us. And it was a moment of intense, crushing pressure. And then we were both out of the body in a place of pure light. So that's the first past life memory that just came spontaneously without any hypnosis. And then there were other things that came. I was doing a group meditation with people, and I saw my Lyran homeworld. And it was a beautiful place, in some ways similar to Pandora from the Avatar movie. And the reptilians invaded and destroyed our planet, and they began attacking the people. And we were not warriors like the ones in the movie. We had never conceived of anything like war at that point. We were a fifth dimensional race, and we were living this beautiful existence. And then these beings came in, and they said, our planet is in trouble. We need to mine some minerals that you have in abundance on your planet. And so the elders said, we wanted to help. So we said, okay, you can mine in this one place. But we were very guarded with these beings because we couldn't read them the way we could read each other. So there was like this guardedness, like, why are they shut off from us? And then it turned out that they were there as invaders. So these memories have a lot of emotional resonance for me as well. My parents and my uncle got me on a ship that was coming here to Earth, to Lemuria, and they stayed behind to cover our getting away. So all of us young people were put on these ships going different places. Some went to the Pleiades, some came to Earth, some came other places. And they stayed behind and sacrificed themselves so that we could get away. And when we got to Earth and we landed in Lemuria, I remember as a young girl just throwing myself on the ground and grabbing at the earth and the plants because I was so wounded from being ripped away from Lyra and my parents and my whole life. And I was a teenager of maybe something like 70 or 75 years old because we lived so long there, I could be 75 years old in Lyran years and still be a teenager. So we came here and we helped humanity to be created here. So in some ways, I'm kind of like a mother of Earth humanity. And that's why I care so much. And then service to self ones came later, which is later in my presentation, and they did things to destroy what we had tried to put in place. So let me go ahead and, let's do that. So this is where I'm going to try to shift the energy into something else. And I'm going to sing some channeled singing for you to help kind of move us through the rest of the presentation. So we'll just do this. And the energy of the word I'm going to focus here is awaken. Next slide. This isn't, oh, there it is, okay. So for me, this part of my presentation and the information that I've wanted to share for the past 3 years, and thank you to Corey and all the people here for giving me a voice back to the public. Thank you so much. So for me, it all started with the Serenity Prayer, and my version is, Great Spirit, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So, what is the Consciousness Initiative? The Consciousness Initiative is a broad-based approach to world change through the power of unified consciousness. We are learning with more certainty than ever that our thoughts do indeed create the world we see around us. Oops, got wrong word. But how do we get stuck in a mind prison, in a control matrix in the first place? Indoctrination, a trap of mind and emotions. Indoctrination is a tool of the ruling classes who have a set of beliefs or a worldview they want to enforce on those governed by them. When and how does indoctrination occur? Okay, so indoctrination in prehistory. Physical indoctrination, it was manipulation of DNA. So we have this picture here showing some kind of ET that has the elongated skull, and he's got this, if I can get the pointer here, he's got this shield here in his technology, and he's working on this woman in this tube of fluid, and he's manipulating her DNA. You can see he's got the DNA right in front of him, and he's, he's disconnecting certain parts of it. And then in this other picture here, this looks like Anunnaki, and they're working on a proto-humanoid, doing something to manipulate the physiology there as well. So this is physical, what I call physical indoctrination that happened in our prehistory. Indoctrination in history. Tools used by the few to control entire populations. Physical, mental, and emotional trauma passed down through genetic memory. It's control of information, make sure that people only get little shreds of truth, not the whole truth, because then they'd awaken, and oh my God, we don't want that. Suppression of genuine truths. And a critically important point here is when a conquered people are made to fight with each other, they're far less likely to rise up against their conquerors. Let's see. Okay. Oops, not that one. Maybe I don't need that one. Okay, so this one kind of shows people being enslaved and hung. I mean, back in the olden days, like in the reign of King Henry VIII, people were beheaded and it was public. You think that's not a form of indoctrination? It absolutely is. It absolutely is. It says, if you don't do what we want you to do, this is what's going to happen to you. And that kind of trauma lives in the body, and it gets absorbed into the genetics, and it gets carried down. So that was one image that shows that. I need a drink of water here. And this is just meant to be information to enlighten all of you and give you the power of choice. So the thing is here, are you going to choose to continue to allow yourself to be indoctrinated, or are you going to take the steps to learn the truth so you can choose what it is you want in your life and what you don't want in your life? So information and truth empowers you with choice to make your own decisions and make your own choices. Yeah. Okay, next here. Paint it there, yeah, okay. There, okay, oops, we went too far. Back, okay. This is the most infamous example that I think we know of is the Spanish Inquisition, which was it was perpetrated against both sexes, but it really went after the women, the herbalists, the intuitives, the midwives, those people that had special, maybe psychic gifts to be able to see into someone and see what they needed for their healing. The church said, oh, we can't have this. We have to have everybody bringing their riches and their wealth to the church. We have to have them coming to us. So they did this to try to stamp out any truth that was still living out there to put in their own programming. Let's get rid of that nasty thing. Okay, one more time here. Okay. Is that okay? There we go. Okay. So this is a quote from John D. Rockefeller. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. Indoctrination, part of the great dumbing down that we've had in this country for the last maybe 30, even to 50 years, is about quashing out any free will and replacing it with indoctrination and the kinds of things they want us to believe. Because look at it this way. In the Matrix films, how many of you saw the Matrix films? Okay, cool. So you're going to know what I mean. In the Matrix films, our human bodies were plugged into a great machine as a battery to keep the great machine running and fuel the virtual reality that they had us plugged into in our minds. But what the real battery is our consciousness, manipulated, indoctrinated, controlled, programmed to keep spinning out a version of reality that works for the ruling classes and keeps us subject to them. But we're the ones that actually have the power. It's just they've made us forget it. They've made us believe that we're weak individuals. We have individuals that have no power. They're the ones that have all the power, and they've managed to make this work. Okay, so now we have to take that back. We have to learn. So, clear, pure truth is seen as dangerous to the ruling class. And the great dumbing down has been through education, I think primarily, but it's done a lot of ways. It's begun in school, and then it's reinforced through the media, newspaper, print media, all kinds of other things that we're inundated with in our daily lives, radio, TV. So here you have a bunch of very individual little children, and they get put through the educational process, and then they come out with this cookie cutter all sameness. And this one was kind of cool. Modern education, creating people who are smart enough to accurately repeat what they're told and follow orders, and dumb enough to think this makes them smarter than everyone else. So anyway, there's the educational piece. And then once we have this kind of indoctrination, then we have science. Science isn't what it used to be. It used to be something really good, but it's for sale, to the highest bidder. And this thing here, corporate science on demand, from 2009 to 2013, 4 major trade associations spent more than $600 million to defend and promote pesticide, biotech, and industrial food products. And so a lot of people can't trust science anymore. And then in a dumbed down population, they don't know anyway. They don't understand scientific method. They don't understand hypothesis to theory to fact. They don't understand any of that anymore. So they just take, it sounds good, so I'll believe it. That's the problem with dumbing down the population. And what it's leading to is a breakdown in civilization and society at a very fundamental level, because people are not well educated enough to really understand what's happening or what's going on. And here's another picture I don't want to have up there too long, but population control, culling the human herd. What do you think it's about? There's chemtrails, there's GMO foods, there's designer drugs and pharmaceuticals, there's so many things, vaccines. Yeah, it's just everywhere, false flags, Agenda 21, there's all this stuff, and all these faces here are some of the perpetrators of this. And I didn't put a Georgia Guidestones slide in here, but on the Georgia Guidestones, it says that the human population should be reduced to 500 million. So why keep a human population like a domesticated herd? Why not just wipe us all us troubling humans out? If they're that scared of us, and us, 7 billion of us rising up against them, why not just wipe us all out? I know they have the technology from my experiences in the military. I know they have the technology. Why not just wipe us all out? Because our collective unconscious human thinking and emotional energy, carefully indoctrinated and programmed over the ages, is the engine or generator of the control matrix. It takes a certain number of us to supply power for that engine. That's why. And archons, they're the overlords of the ruling classes. Okay, and I pulled these pictures from the internet. This one I really like. It's a blog about archons that really had some great things to say. This is a picture from Stargate SG-1 of a statue of Goa'uld symbiotes. And the thing I liked about Stargate SG-1 is these Goa'uld symbiotes, they're very much like archons. They invade a human host, just like these energetic extra-dimensional creatures attached to humans and try to influence or even possess them. And they become extremely narcissistic. So I think the explosion of narcissism we've seen in our culture in the last 20, 30 years just grow and grow and grow is because more and more people that want power and control fall under the influence or the possession of these creatures. And then they just kind of run with it. Even just to mention the manual used in psychiatric and psychological work, the DSM manual, DSM-5. There's a lot of therapists that have kind of really revolted against the DSM-5 because it's invented so many disorders that are specious and ridiculous, like oppositional defiant disorder. That disorder in that book could allow people to forcibly medicate someone who is standing on their own 2 feet and saying, I'm not going to buy your crap. So really, it really pays to be aware of this, and all of this I go into much more in depth in my book. So here we have these Goa'uld symbiotes, which are very archon-like. This is a statue of a reptilian. Here's a reptilian drawing that was good. And this is on the cover of John Lamb Lash's book about Not in Our Image, about the Gnostic archons. And is that the face of the new religion for masses of humanity that you want? It's not what I want. Okay, point it the right direction, Niara. Oops, don't go too far. Okay, so then there was this crop circle. Again, it's a gray ET. And I'm not saying all grays are bad. There may be good groups of them, and there may be good groups of reptilians. I don't want to paint them all with the same evil brush. And, there is a way to tell the difference if you can go into yourself and be quiet and sense the incoming vibrations of what's coming at you. So, let's see. Did I go back here? Back one. Back one. Okay, so the message came from Paul Vigay, who deciphered it using ASCII computer code. Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. There is good out there. We oppose deception, conduit closing. So I think that they were trying to warn us with this crop circle of the archon influence on our planet. I really believe that. So humanity's chance to take down the control matrix. We're imprisoned by our own collective unconscious minds from the energy of our programmed thoughts and emotions. We've been made into our own jailers. But this also means we have the keys to our freedom. We need to question everything about our entire reality. Everything. Just like it was mentioned, I think with Gerald in his presentation, or Jay, I think he was talking about the ether. It's like this, like we swim in the ether like fish swim in water. We don't question it. We don't question the water we're swimming in. You know, it's just our environment. But we need to question it because it's filled with programs that are keeping us locked in the control matrix. And what we want to do is take down the control matrix and replace it like defragging a computer, maybe. You know, have you ever watched a computer defrag and you watch the little blocks change color and everything goes back to a nice state? You know, it's kind of like that. You know, what we have to do is just take it over bit by bit until we make it into a matrix of love and of light and of unity. So. Okay. And here's emotions. Now, emotions, I'm going to tell you, because I have a good analogy from being a radar tech and working in electronics in the Air Force. And when we first went in the Air Force at technical training school, we made these little things that they called pinger detectors. And a pinger was a newcomer to the training base, which I was for a while. So anyway, so we built these little things, and you get resistors, and you solder them in here, and you get a capacitor, and you solder it in here. And the goal is to make a little circuit board that when you put electricity to it, it lights up. Well, our thoughts create the framework, just like on the circuit board. So think of thinking and dreaming and imagination as creating the circuits that you want to work in a particular way, and then emotion is what supplies the power. Emotion supplies the power to the thoughts that we create. And that's why it's become so crystal clear to me that through the indoctrination and the programming, through school and the media of all kinds, that our brains, our minds, and our emotions have been programmed to keep spinning out the control matrix from our consciousness in an unconscious state. So we need to make that unconscious material conscious, and we need to be, once we learn what's been done to us, then we have choice. When they keep us in ignorance, then we don't even know we have the choice. What I'm trying to do with this presentation is give you back choice. So. And this, the top drawing there is a representation of DNA, and the emotion of fear is a long, slow wave, and it moves through the DNA, and it doesn't make many contacts with the codons on the DNA. But the energy of love down here has a much higher frequency, and so it makes contact with many more codons, turning them on and energizing them. So this is why it is so important to keep our emotional state in love and harmony and all of that. And a lot of people will say, oh, you have to shun the dark and don't think of anything negative and everything. So, but the thing of it is there's so much negativity that we're confronted with all the time. Instead of trying to not look at it, it's like, well, we need to look at it. We need to understand that it's there. And what I've done is I take all of my worst, deepest, darkest fears, and I do kind of a visualization where I walk myself through each one of those fears, okay? Well, I have a real fear of this. So I walk myself through it in my mind and see myself coming out the other side in a successful way. And even if somebody was to kill me, I know it's not the end of me. I'm not this stuff. I'm soul. I'm something that's going to survive the death of the body. You know, and hopefully nothing ever that extreme would happen. But if you're afraid of something and that fear has a hold of you, trying to hide from it isn't going to work. Facing into it and seeing yourself moving through it successfully is the way to release the power of that fear that it will have on you. So that's what I really recommend. And fear is deliberately being used by those in control to keep our evolutionary process from unfolding. We can see it by all the fear porn spun out in the media. They really are just wanting so much to keep us in fear because they're afraid of us. They're terrified of us because so many of us are waking up now. They're really terrified, so they're really pouring it on. War and everything else, they're really pouring it on. So it's good to just face into it, find a way to handle it, see yourself moving through it successfully, and those fears will lose their grip on you. Okay, and here we have what I call the physics of interconnectivity and the double slit experiment. And how many of you have seen What the Bleep? Do we know? Many, many. I would say watch it many times. I even saw it at the theater 8 times because I just loved it so much. But it's really important. So to get those principles, I would recommend watching that film several times. The basics of the double slit experiment was when subatomic particles are not being observed, they exist as waves of probability. When subatomic particles, such as electrons, are being observed, they arrange themselves into forms of seemingly solid matter. But what we know is that this stuff, all this stuff, the thing I'm standing on, it's mostly empty space. It's mostly empty space. So in that empty space is magic, folks. It's magic, because that's where our consciousness can make the shift. Okay, the quantum reality. Physical reality is a surface impression. These are my words put together here. Physical reality is a surface impression formed by energy, which is responsive to consciousness, thought, and intention, directed by awareness and powered by emotions. And this is from, what is the movie? I can't think of it right now. The 13th Floor. That's a picture from the 13th floor, where one of the denizens of the 13th floor tried to go to the edge of his reality and ran into this odd-looking stuff that is mostly empty space. And he could see, wow, this is the edge of our world. What am I in here, So this is kind of the borders of reality that many of us in this room are facing today. We're starting to see through that. We're starting to see the lies that we've been told and the underlying truth of what's really there. And energy fields. Energy fields connect all of us. All of your energy fields in this room are mingling together and interacting. And the knowledge that one of you has is being somehow transmitted to everyone around you. And we're going to walk away from this event knowing a lot more and understanding a lot more just through energy that we didn't understand before. That's really cool. In a few decades, scientists have gone from the conviction that there is no such thing as an energy field around the human body to an absolute certainty that it exists. Moreover, science is explaining the roles of energy fields in health and disease. And this was by James Oshman, PhD. And here's, oops. Come on, look back there. Hello. One more back. Oh, here it goes. Finally went back. So this is just a picture. This is from Barbara Brennan's book, which I really love. And it shows, this one on the left shows 7 layers of the human aura visible. And you know what all those layers mean? That's really a representation of what multidimensional beings we really are. Because we exist not just here, we exist on all those other levels, all the way up, and they all exist in the same space. It's just our attention, like a radio dial set to a particular station, all of our attention is riveted right here in this stuff right here in the forms that we see around us. But we actually exist on all the other dimensions simultaneously. We truly are multidimensional beings. And that's a truth. And that's something, again, that's going to help free you to imagine something better. To imagine something more beautiful and more loving. Oops, too far. Okay. And this is some pre-quantum physics wisdom from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he said this quote, this beautiful quote, and he was a Jesuit, and he's one of the examples that even within an order like the Jesuits, which have really been frowned on in a lot of ways, that there are still enlightened individuals who join the order so that they would have a chance to devote their lives to a particular area of study. Someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then, for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. I'm going to read just a little bit of this. I found this on the internet as well, but I think it's worth sharing here. The noosphere can be seen as the sphere of human thought being derived from the Greek nous, meaning mind, in the style of atmosphere and biosphere. In the original theory of Vernadsky, the noosphere is the third in a succession of phases of development of the Earth, after the geosphere, inanimate matter, and biosphere, biological life. The word is also sometimes used to refer to human consciousness emerging from interactions of human minds. This is the view proposed by theologian Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Deschardins became enthralled with the possibilities for humankind, which he saw as heading for an exciting convergence of systems, an omega point, where the coalescence of consciousness will lead us to a new state of peace and planetary unity. Long before ecology became fashionable, he saw this unity as being based intrinsically on the spirit of the earth. Teilhard de Chardin passed away a full 10 years before James Lovelock ever proposed the Gaia hypothesis, which suggests that the earth is actually a living being, a colossal biological supersystem. Yet Deschardins' writings clearly reflect the sense of Earth as having its own autonomous personality and being the prime center and director of our future, a strange attractor, if you will, that will be the guiding force for the synthesis of humankind. So, a very great man. I really enjoyed studying about him. He really had vision. Love in the Consciousness Initiative. So what kind of love is needed here? And I said agape, a Greek word for the highest form of love, pure, unconditional, non-attached, divine love. The practice of an accepting, non-attached form of compassionate love as part of the Consciousness Initiative is vital. With the practice of this type of compassionate love, two possibilities exist. Love could open the hearts of those in control, or those who are incorrigible will flee from the wave of love. But we can't lose if we use love. And we use that wave of love that we can produce from our collective hearts. We can't lose. Imagination, used with the energy of divine love, is truly a creative divine gift from Source Creator that can remake our world, fueled by the power of our incredible emotional energy. Again, our emotional energy, that's the power behind our thoughts. So when we use our imagination to envision the world as we want it to be, a loving, kind place where we would be happy to have our children grow up, then we use our emotional energy to infuse those thoughts with the energy to make it real. And love is ever so much more powerful than fear. What we must do is become adept at observing our world and, through imagination, turn what negatives we see around 180 degrees to visualize something positive we wish to see in its place. Defrag that machine. The two sides of the law of attraction. The first side, keep your focus as positive as absolutely possible, generate as much positive emotion as possible, hold steadfastly to your vision and emotional resonance of what you want to create with absolute steadfastness. This is just half the process, as I've learned. The second side is our environment is continually giving us feedback in the form, Our environment is continually giving us feedback in the form of what we see around us that we do not like, so we can look within and clear what we might be holding in our unconscious minds that is thwarting our attempts at manifestation. And that's the important part. That's the part that they didn't want to give out in that movie, The Secret. They barely touched on it. They showed a boardroom of, powerful looking men in suits who were making all these decisions and everything else like that. And they had the secrets, but they didn't want us to have those secrets. They just wanted to give us the one half without the other half. And we need both sides of this to make it work. We really do. So facing our collective shadow. The fearful things we see around us are the very material we could be using to face our inner unconscious shadow sides. The things we fear are the parts of us programmed from ages past and in our current lifetimes and personal experiences in the here and now. And I have the picture of Luke Skywalker there, where he went into the cave and cut off the head of Darth Vader, who he saw in the cave. And Yoda said, "You don't need your weapons in there." I remember that. But he took his weapons in anyway, and then when he saw Darth Vader, he thought, "That's the guy that killed my father. I'm going to get him." And so he went and he fought him and he cut off his head, and then the mask exploded off and his face was in there. His face was in there because it was a shadow part of himself that he needed to confront in that energetic environment that Yoda asked him to go into. And the lesson that he learned from that helped him when he faced Darth Vader, found out that he was truly Luke's father. And then in the final battle with the Emperor and Darth Vader, and Luke was brought before the Emperor by Darth Vader, his love for his father, understanding what had been done to his father to turn him to the dark side, it was his love that redeemed his father. And then his father saved him from the Emperor and killed the Emperor, and balance was restored to the Force. That's the work that is before all of us in our own hearts and minds. And I ask you, please, to undertake it. Please. Thank you. So if you're scowling at a hazy chemtrail sky, stop. Acknowledge that some part of you allowed this to manifest. And you don't have to analyze it. Just say, okay, some part of me allowed this to manifest. And then love that part of yourself back into the wholeness of you, of who you are. Then next, visualize beautiful, healthy aspects of the sky and feel with your heart, with your emotions, as much as possible, how much you would love to see that kind of sky for the rest of your lives. That's the way to change it. Emotions, what are they and how do we handle them? I go into emotions quite a bit more in depth in my book. So we have all the colors of love. There's love and fear, and the love comes in many, many colors and so on and so forth. And then fear, I call it, there's lots of shades of fear. So with love, there's contentment, joy, happiness, fun. And with fear, there's rage, grief, depression, anger. Those are the shades of fear and the colors of love. And then emotional neutrality. The last 3 years of my life have been extremely difficult, where one ugly, nasty, disturbing thing after another kept coming at me. And because of my PTSD, it really had me spun out of control for a while. And I was like, what in the heck is happening to me? I mean, really disturbing things. The most disturbing thing, the one that really let me know that something was happening was I was trying to buy a house. And I'd worked really hard on this and was trying to make it happen. And some woman showed up when I was outside playing with my dog at my apartment in a certain area. And she drove by, and my dog kind of leaped at her car barking because she was still a puppy. And she just kept driving, and I was trying to flag her, no, stop, because I didn't want her to hit my dog. She didn't hit my dog, but it was kind of a scary thing. And I asked her, I said, why did you do that when I was trying to get you to stop? And she just went on attack. She just went on attack towards me. And I had never seen her before in my life. I had no idea who she was. And she said, you'll never get that house now. you'll never get that house now. I didn't even know who she was. How could she know that about me? Just a lot of weird things happened. So I learned during that time that I've come out of now that emotional neutrality is really important. And during those 3 years where PTSD really had a grip on me, I learned to recognize when it comes up. And when the anxiety starts to come up, it comes up like right here. And so it comes up, I need to stop whatever I'm doing. I need to get out of whatever situation I'm in and go take care of myself. I need to go quiet. I need to breathe. I need to recenter myself before those survival PTSD emotions really take a hold. So that's what I've really learned. And I'll tell you something else. I really have a lot of compassion and heart now for veterans that suffer from PTSD and those that actually are driven to commit suicide. I know what drives them to commit suicide because I lived it for the last 3 years. And they have all my compassion. The other thing is non-attached desire, which I differentiate a little bit between desire and wanting. Wanting is like this needy thing, you know. Desire is like, okay, well, I would really like for this to happen, but you don't want to grasp at it because then it kind of slips away. So non-attached desire is a very important thing to cultivate, and I'll probably be writing more about that or sharing more about that in the future, not today. But non-attached desire is a very important thing. It's kind of like, oh, I'd really love to see those blue skies, and just release it to the universe without attachment. And attachment brings anxiety, which then leads to fear, and then leads to polarizing and divisive words and behaviors that tear apart and destroy the unity that could save us all. The archons and the ruling classes, they want to destroy the unity. They fear us coming together. They fear a population of 7 billion and growing on this planet ever getting the knowledge that would bring them together. So they do everything they can to keep us divided and conquered. And that's got to stop to save our world. Non-interference, a personal prime directive. So create and strengthen your own inner connection to divine spirit until your light shines brightly. Inspire others to join you rather than convincing them. Freedom and taking self-responsibility are the gifts we give to ourselves and to each other. And really, this is about not being codependent, because the essence of being codependent and codependency is to try to control another person, either for your own ends, or if you love the person like a child or a husband or a wife or something like that, you might want to control them for their own good as you see it. But sometimes when you do that, you interfere with their soul lessons. So be an example. Make yourself into the most loving, conscious, aware example possible, and invite people to be, let people be inspired by your example and want to be like you, rather than trying to reach out and try to control them and get them to do a certain thing. Practicing the consciousness initiative. Creating unity is not about giving up who you are or what you think or feel. It's about agreeing to disagree on particular points and moving beyond disagreement to finding the common ground we all share as human beings. We all have hearts that love and feel emotional pain. Let's agree to disagree and focus on what brings us together. Crisis brings out our divine creativity. It may be a time of crisis, but it doesn't have to be a time of catastrophe. It's in times of crisis that human beings are often most creative and ingenious, and that they pull together most effectively to solve their problems. That's where we are right now. And this is from The Great Transformation by Thomas Homer Dixon in 2009. Chaos theory, I wanted to throw this in because small actions yield big results. So we have this little conference going on here, which is very tiny on the face of planet Earth. But a whole wave is going out from here. An entire wave of consciousness and light and knowing. It has been said that a flutter of a butterfly's wing could cause a typhoon halfway across the world. Chaos theory. So we want a wave of love. We don't want a typhoon. We want a wave of love to sweep over the entire planet and bring us all together in that vision Teilhard de Chardin saw of the noosphere, where we're all individuals but united in our love and our consciousness. Okay. Connecting with the energy of Earth herself, our mother. So I have earthing sandals on today, with little copper things in them to keep me connected to the Earth. The Earth herself, I believe, because everything in the universe is alive, rocks, plants, birds, even the unanimate objects that we look at as just a thing. It's all alive. It all has some level of consciousness. It all has some place in the whole. And so if you go out from here and you have maybe one or two friends that want to practice this kind of energy, that want to practice the consciousness initiative and envisioning a new world and a new space, then take your shoes off and put your feet in the earth while you're doing the work, because the energy of Earth herself will help us. And she's right under our feet. Freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. With greater freedom comes greater responsibility. This simply means understanding the divine law that freedom cannot be used to limit or curtail the freedoms of others. All life is sacred in the eyes of the infinite loving multiverse. All life generally lives in a synergistic or symbiotic balance with all other life. Even though a predator animal takes another animal as food, or human beings and other animals harvest plants for food in a non-harmful way to both plants and animals, and when they do that, divine law is still served. So this is what we want to do. We want to make sure that we are taking that freedom for ourselves, but not abusing it by trying to control other people. And we have nothing to lose and everything to gain by practicing this consciousness initiative. We will make an impact. And by practicing the consciousness initiative on a daily basis in some of the ways shared here today, we can show the benevolent and spiritually evolved off-world civilizations who have been monitoring Earth down through the ages, many of whom are our star families, that we are ready for full disclosure and contact. And now I'm going to sing a little bit more and then we'll close. So, and the word I'm focusing is freedom. So, from my heart to yours, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say in closing that we speakers are nothing without all of you. You guys are the wind in our sails, and I am honored to be before you today, and very humble. And I've been so energized to see the young people that have been speaking here, Jordan and Justin and Eric and others and other young people that I've met who are part of the audience, because I know that when I pass into the great beyond, the earth is going to be in really good hands. Thank you. Thank you.